Claressa Shields might be the most financially exploited, creatively manipulated, and professionally sabotaged athlete in the entire history of modern sports, and what is happening to her right now behind the closed doors of Wynn Records is a scheme so calculated and so brazen that it should make every single person watching this video absolutely furious. I am not exaggerating. I am not performing for clicks. What I am about to lay out for you over the next several minutes is going to completely reframe everything you thought you understood about the Claressa Shields situation, the Papoose relationship, the Remy Ma divorce drama, and the Chrisean Rock boxing experiment, because when you pull every single one of these threads and weave them together, you are going to see a picture so disturbing and so painfully obvious that you will genuinely wonder how not a single person in the mainstream media has had the courage to say it out loud yet. But before we get into any of that, I need everybody watching to understand something. This is not a hit piece. This is not me coming at Claressa Shields because I have some kind of personal vendetta. In fact, it is the exact opposite of that. I have been one of the people in Claressa's corner from the very beginning of her boxing career. I have watched this woman overcome obstacles that would have broken literally every other athlete on the face of this planet. Claressa Shields went from the roughest neighborhood in Flint, Michigan, to becoming the undisputed champion across multiple weight divisions, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, and the self-proclaimed GWOAT, the greatest woman of all time. And honestly, when it comes to what happens inside that boxing ring, she might actually be right about that claim. Claressa Shields has earned every single ounce of respect she commands between those four ropes. But somewhere between the championship belts and the championship rings, somebody got into Claressa Shields' ear and convinced her of something that is going to end up costing her far more than any punch she has ever absorbed in that ring. They convinced her that she could rap. And not just rap as a hobby, not just jump on a track for fun at a party. No. They convinced Claressa Shields that she was a legitimate recording artist, a real MC, someone who belonged in a professional studio alongside actual rappers who have spent their entire lives, their entire childhoods, their entire existences perfecting this craft. And the most heartbreaking part of all of this? The people who convinced Claressa Shields of that lie are the exact same people who are right now, as we speak, profiting off of her name, her brand, her image, and her bank account while she runs around thinking she is the next great hip-hop artist. Which brings us to Wynn Records, and this is where the story takes a turn that I genuinely did not see coming until I started putting the pieces together one by one. Claressa Shields signed an $8 million deal with Salida Promotions and Wynn Records. Now, on the surface, that sounds absolutely incredible. $8 million. A historic partnership. The first time a female boxer has ever secured a deal of this magnitude. The headlines were glowing. The press releases were celebratory. Claressa Shields was being called a pioneer, a trailblazer, someone shattering barriers between sports and entertainment. It was a feel-good story that the entire industry rallied behind. But here is what nobody told you when those headlines dropped. Wynn Records is the very same label where Papoose serves as creative director. Yes, the same Papoose who is currently romantically involved with Claressa Shields. The same Papoose who is still legally married to Remy Ma. The same Papoose who filed for divorce back in May of 2025 but as of this very moment, more than a year later, has not finalized that divorce. The same Papoose who has been at the dead center of one of the messiest, most public, most exhausting relationship scandals in recent hip-hop memory. That is the man who is running the music division of the label that just handed Claressa Shields $8 million and told her she could be a rapper. Now, I need you to really sit with that information for a second, because the implications here are staggering when you actually think about them. You have a man who is romantically involved with the athlete. That same man is the creative director of the label signing that athlete. And that same man has a direct, vested financial interest in keeping that athlete happy, compliant, and continuously producing content. That is not a business relationship. That is not a professional arrangement. That is a conflict of interest so massive that in literally any other industry on this planet, it would trigger an immediate federal investigation. But in the world of hip-hop and boxing, where money talks and accountability walks right out the back door, nobody is asking the questions that desperately need to be asked. And here is where it gets even worse, because when you look at what Wynn Records actually got out of this deal, it becomes painfully, embarrassingly clear what the real play was from the very beginning. Wynn Records did not sign Claressa Shields because they heard a demo and thought they had found the next Nicki Minaj. They did not sign her because they believed she had untapped lyrical genius hiding somewhere inside her. They signed Claressa Shields because she is quite possibly the only person associated with that entire label who has any real, measurable commercial momentum. She is the biggest name on the roster. She is the one generating the headlines, the clicks, the views, the social media engagement, and most importantly, the revenue. Without Claressa Shields, Wynn Records is just another label with a roster that nobody is checking for, nobody is streaming, and nobody is talking about. So what did they do? They did what every savvy, calculated music executive does when they find an artist with more fame than talent and more money than industry knowledge. They told Claressa Shields exactly what she wanted to hear. They told her she could rap. They told her she could sing. They told her she was a dual threat, a crossover superstar, the next great entertainer who could dominate both the ring and the charts. They hyped her head up so far into the clouds that she actually believed that signing with them was the smartest decision she could possibly make for her career. And Claressa Shields, God bless her, fell for it. Hook, line, sinker, and the fishing rod too. Now, let me be crystal clear about something here because I do not want anybody twisting my words. I am not calling Claressa Shields stupid. I am not saying she is unintelligent. What I am saying is that Claressa Shields is a boxer who has spent her entire life training in a gym, studying fight tape, and perfecting her craft inside a ring. She is not a music industry insider. She does not know how label deals work behind the scenes. She does not know about recoupment clauses and 360 deals and creative control provisions and royalty structures. She is a world-class athlete who was approached by people she trusted, people who were supposed to have her best interests at heart, and those people sold Claressa Shields a dream that was engineered from the ground up to benefit them far more than it will ever benefit her. And the proof is right there in the pudding, because since signing that deal, what has Claressa Shields actually released? Let us talk about the music, because this is where the gap between the promise and the reality becomes a chasm wide enough to swallow an entire career whole. Claressa dropped a track called IDGAF 2. And when I tell you that the reaction to this song was something to behold, I am underselling it by a mile. The Breakfast Club posted it on their Instagram with a caption saying she slid on it, but if you actually scroll down and read the comments on that post, you would see a story that was being told in a completely different voice. The comments were absolutely brutal. People were calling it the worst track of the year. People were questioning whether Claressa Shields had any business being near a microphone, let alone inside a recording studio. And the thing that really jumped out to me was the length of her diss track. When Claressa actually dropped a full diss track aimed at her critics, it was barely 1 minute long. 1 minute. That is not a song. That is a voice memo with a beat behind it. That is what happens when you walk into a studio and the producer realizes very quickly that there is only so much material they can work with before the entire thing collapses under its own weight. And let us not even get into the fact that Claressa Shields has been running around starting conflicts with more people than a drill rapper has ops on the street. She wants smoke with everybody. She is ready to go toe-to-toe with any and all comers, not in the boxing ring where that energy would actually serve a legitimate competitive purpose, but on social media and in interviews and in studios where that aggression just reads as someone who is perpetually angry at the world because deep down she knows the truth that nobody around Claressa Shields will say to her face. And the way the people around Claressa Shields have been treating her music career tells you absolutely everything you need to know about what they really think of her abilities. When Claressa went on a show and performed her rap live, the way the host reacted was one of the most revealing moments I have ever witnessed in entertainment. The reaction was not the reaction you give to a legitimate artist who just delivered a serious verse. It was not the reaction you give to someone who just put real thought and real effort into their craft. It was the reaction you give to a child who just recited their first poem at a school assembly. It was the daddy, come listen to my rap reaction. It was the pat on the head, good job honey, that is my baby reaction. And the entire time this was happening, Claressa Shields is standing there as a grown woman, a world champion, a millionaire, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, getting the exact same treatment a 5-year-old gets when they sing the alphabet song for their parents. That is not respect. That is patronizing. And the fact that Claressa Shields cannot tell the difference between the two tells you just how deep the delusion has been allowed to run. Because here is the thing about the music industry that nobody puts on a glossy press release for you. When everyone around you is telling you that you are incredible, and not a single one of those people will put you in a room with a real producer who will give you honest, unfiltered feedback, that is not a support system. That is an echo chamber engineered to keep you producing content that generates clicks and revenue for everyone involved except you. But the music is just one piece of this puzzle, because what really exposed the full scope of what is happening with Claressa Shields was the Chrisean Rock situation, and this is where the hypocrisy became so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it on a plate. Claressa Shields, in her capacity as a boxing mentor and a veteran of the fight game, sat down with Chrisean Rock for a training session. And during that session, Claressa looked Chrisean dead in the eye and told her that she needed to stay away from Blueface. She told Chrisean Rock that if she was serious about boxing, if she was serious about turning her life around, she needed to leave that toxic relationship behind her and focus entirely on her career. On the surface, that sounds like solid advice from a veteran who has been through the ringer and knows exactly what it takes to succeed at the highest level. But here is the problem, and it is a problem so massive you could see it from space. Claressa Shields is currently in a relationship with a man who is still legally married to another woman. Papoose has not finalized his divorce from Remy Ma. He filed the paperwork in May of 2025, and here we are well over a year later, and those divorce papers are still sitting somewhere collecting dust, unsigned and unprocessed. So Claressa Shields, a woman who is actively dating a married man, took it upon herself to sit down and lecture another woman about her relationship choices. And the internet did not let that slide for a single fraction of a second. The backlash was immediate and it was relentless. People were calling Claressa Shields a hypocrite from every single corner of social media, every blog, every comment section, every reaction channel. They were pointing out the staggering absurdity of someone who is in a relationship with a still legally married man telling another woman to leave her partner. They were posting side-by-side comparisons. They were creating memes. They were dragging Claressa Shields through the mud, and honestly, they had a point. You cannot stand on a moral high ground when the foundation you are standing on is built on the same questionable material you are telling someone else to avoid. And the most devastating part of the entire Chrisean Rock situation? What Chrisean did next. Because despite Claressa's advice, despite the sit-down, despite the so-called mentorship and the cameras rolling and the Instagram posts about empowerment and focus, Chrisean Rock went right back to Blueface. She did not just go back to him quietly either. She was spotted partying with him shortly after the training session with Claressa went public. The message was clearer than a glass window and more cutting than a surgeon's scalpel. Chrisean Rock heard Claressa Shields' advice, weighed it against the person delivering it, and decided that the messenger was so compromised that the message itself was not worth following. And that right there is the perfect analogy for this entire saga, because it exposes the fundamental, core problem with Claressa Shields' current position in the public eye. You cannot be a moral authority when your own house is actively on fire. You cannot tell someone to leave a toxic situation when you are neck-deep in one yourself. And when Remy Ma responded to all of this, she did it in the most devastating way possible. Not with a press statement. Not with an Instagram story. Not with a tearful podcast appearance. She did it with a freestyle over the WYFL beat that cut so deep it left a mark that Claressa Shields is still trying to pretend does not exist on her face. Remy Ma's freestyle was a masterclass in how to dismantle an opponent without ever raising your voice. She did not scream. She did not rant. She did not throw furniture or crash interviews. She just rapped, and every single bar landed like a precision-guided strike aimed directly at the foundation of Claressa Shields' entire entertainment persona. The line that everybody remembers, the one that echoed across social media and became a viral soundbite overnight, the one that got stitched into thousands of reaction videos and quote tweets and TikTok overlays, was devastatingly simple in its construction and devastatingly complex in its implications. Remy Ma said, "You wanna be a baddie but you ain't bad enough." That is not just a bar. That is a thesis statement. That is Remy Ma looking at Claressa Shields and saying, "I see exactly what you are trying to do here. You want to be in this world. You want to be a rapper, a singer, a baddie, a cultural figure, a multi-hyphenate entertainer. But you do not have the tools. You do not have the talent. You do not have the credibility. And more importantly, you do not have the self-awareness to realize that the people around you are using you as a walking, talking, rapping ATM machine." And the reason that freestyle was so devastatingly effective is because Remy Ma can actually rap. Remy Ma has spent her entire career in this industry. She knows what good bars sound like. She knows what a real verse looks like. She knows the difference between someone who has put in the work and someone who is playing dress-up. And when she decided to aim her pen at Claressa Shields, she did it with the precision of someone who has been writing and performing at the highest level of this genre for decades. There was nothing amateur about it. There was nothing forced about it. It was just pure, unfiltered skill meeting unfiltered delusion, and the result was not even a contest. It was an execution. But here is the part that really twisted the knife, and it is something that I have not seen nearly enough people talk about in all of the coverage of this situation. Papoose, the man who is supposed to be Claressa Shields' partner, her creative director, her musical guide and mentor, once claimed publicly that he wrote 90% of Remy Ma's raps. He said it. He put it out there. He took credit for the pen game of one of the most respected, most accomplished female rappers in the entire history of the genre. And here is the proof that it was a flat-out lie. After Papoose and Remy Ma separated, after the relationship crumbled and the divorce proceedings began, Remy Ma kept rapping. And she kept rapping at the same level, if not a higher level, than she ever had before. Her freestyles were sharp. Her bars were clean. Her flow was immaculate. There was zero drop-off. Zero regression. Zero missing piece. If Papoose had truly written 90% of her material, that would have been scientifically impossible. The quality would have cratered. The pen would have dried up. The verses would have fallen apart. But none of that happened, because Remy Ma was always the one holding that pen. She was always the architect of her own rhymes. And Papoose, in taking credit for her work, revealed more about his own character than he ever intended to. And that brings us to the most painful, most uncomfortable question in this entire saga. If Papoose claimed to write for Remy Ma and clearly did not, and if Papoose is now Claressa Shields' creative director and musical mentor at Wynn Records, why has he not written a single bar for Claressa? Where are the verses? Where are the ghostwritten tracks? Where is the material that would at least make Claressa Shields sound competent on a microphone? The answer is as obvious as it is cruel. Papoose is not writing for Claressa Shields because he does not believe in her music career either. He knows she cannot rap. Everybody at Wynn Records knows Claressa Shields cannot rap. The producers know it. The engineers know it. The A&R representatives know it. The interns know it. The only person in that entire building who does not know it is Claressa Shields herself, and that is because not a single person in that building has the courage or the financial incentive to tell her the truth. Because here is the thing. If you are Wynn Records and you have an athlete who is generating millions of dollars in revenue through her boxing career, through her brand partnerships, through her social media presence, and through her sheer star power and name recognition, the very last thing you want to do is sit her down and tell her that her music is terrible. You do not kill the golden goose. You keep the golden goose happy. You keep the golden goose in a studio making tracks that nobody will actually stream but that generate headlines and content and engagement and social media buzz. You keep the golden goose convinced that she is an artist so she stays signed to your label so you can continue to collect your percentage of every dollar that flows through her brand. It is the oldest play in the music industry playbook, and Claressa Shields walked right into it with her eyes wide open and her ears completely and utterly shut. And the scatter pattern on Claressa Shields' business portfolio tells you everything you need to know about someone who has completely lost focus of what made her great in the first place. Claressa is selling voodoo dolls. She is selling bobblehead dolls with her likeness on them. She is selling sweatsuits branded with her logo. She is selling hair bundles. At one point, Claressa Shields was literally out here selling car parts, brake pads, automotive accessories. The kind of things you find at an auto supply store on a Tuesday afternoon, being moved by a world-class athlete who should be on the cover of Sports Illustrated instead of running a flea market operation on social media. While simultaneously trying to maintain a world-class boxing career, launch a rap career, launch a singing career, run a merchandise empire, and be a cultural personality. That is not diversification. That is not entrepreneurship. That is desperation dressed up in a business suit and parading around like it is a strategy. That is someone throwing absolutely everything at the wall to see what sticks because nobody around Claressa Shields has the honesty to tell her which things are worth her time and which things are a complete and total waste of her energy and her money. And the boxing, the one thing, the singular thing that Claressa Shields is genuinely, undeniably, historically world-class at, the one thing that made her a legend and a millionaire and a household name and an inspiration to an entire generation of young athletes, is getting buried under all of this noise. Claressa Shields should be in a gym right now. She should be studying fight tape. She should be working with her trainers, sharpening the tools that made her the GWOAT in the first place. Instead, she is in a recording studio, struggling to string together a verse, surrounded by yes-men who clap for her the way you clap for a toddler who just figured out how to walk across the living room without falling down. And the comparisons Claressa Shields makes for herself tell you just how disconnected from reality this entire situation has gotten. Claressa Shields talks like she is Sexy Red. Claressa carries herself like she is Young Miami or JT from the City Girls. Claressa Shields acts like she is operating in the same lane as women who have made music their entire profession, their entire identity, their entire reason for existing in the public eye. But Claressa Shields, those women are rappers. That is their profession. That is what they do. They live in studios. They work with producers for months on end. They write and rewrite and refine bars until they are razor sharp, until every syllable hits with maximum impact. Your profession is boxing. Your craft is fighting. And the fact that you cannot tell the difference between those two worlds is exactly why this entire situation is as tragic as it is to watch unfold. Because here is what nobody is saying out loud, and I think it desperately needs to be said. Claressa Shields is being used. She is being used by a label that wants her revenue stream. She is being used by a partner who wants her celebrity and her income. She is being used by an industry that sees a famous athlete with more money than musical knowledge and immediately recognizes an opportunity to extract value. And Claressa Shields, because she is so hungry for validation outside of the boxing ring, because she is so desperate to be taken seriously as something more than just a fighter, is allowing every bit of it to happen. She is signing the deals. She is releasing the music. She is putting herself in positions where she becomes the punchline of every joke and the subject of every reaction video, and she genuinely thinks it is because people are hating on her. She thinks the criticism is jealousy. She thinks the backlash is hate. She thinks the reaction videos and the comment sections and the meme pages are all just people who are envious of her success and threatened by her ambition. She does not realize that the backlash is concern wearing a sarcastic mask, that the people laughing are also the people who wish she would just wake up and see what is happening to her before it is too late to undo the damage. The advice that Claressa Shields gave Chrisean Rock about staying away from Blueface? That is the exact same advice that half the internet is trying to give Claressa Shields right now about her own situation. Stay away from the people who are using you. Stay away from the situation that is draining your resources and your reputation. Focus on what you are actually great at. The difference is that Chrisean Rock heard the advice and ignored it, and Claressa Shields is doing the exact same thing with the advice being directed at her. The parallel is so perfect it is almost poetic, and the fact that Claressa Shields cannot see it is the single most damning piece of evidence in this entire case. And I want to be very specific about what I am saying regarding Papoose, because I think the Remy Ma situation gives us the clearest, most unobstructed window into what is really happening behind the scenes here. Papoose waited for Remy Ma while she served 6 years in prison. 6 years. He stood by her. He held her down. He visited her. He was celebrated across the entire industry as one of the most loyal, most devoted partners in the history of hip-hop relationships. And then, when Remy Ma was finally free and their relationship hit a rough patch, Papoose moved on to Claressa Shields. He filed for divorce. He started a new relationship. And almost immediately, almost suspiciously immediately, Claressa Shields was signed to the label where Papoose works as creative director. The timing alone should make every person with a functioning brain raise an eyebrow. The fact that Papoose went from being Remy Ma's devoted, prison-waiting husband to being Claressa Shields' creative director and romantic partner in what felt like the blink of an eye should tell you something about how this man operates. It should tell you something about his pattern. It should tell you something about whether his interests in Claressa Shields are rooted in genuine care for her as a person or in the financial opportunities that her name, her brand, and her earning power represent. When you watch the trajectory of Papoose moving from one powerful, financially successful woman to another, from Remy Ma to Claressa Shields, from one career to the next, from one revenue stream to the next, the pattern is not just visible. It is glaring. It is sitting right there in front of everyone, and yet nobody seems willing to point at it and name it for what it is. And what did Remy Ma do in response to all of this? She did what any real rapper would do. She picked up a pen, she found a beat, and she handled it on wax. She did not need a press conference. She did not need a reality TV episode. She did not need to go on a podcast tour and cry about what happened. She just rapped, and in doing so, she exposed every single flaw, every single crack, every single weakness in the Claressa Shields and Papoose narrative. Because when Remy Ma said that Claressa wants to be a baddie but is not bad enough, she was not just talking about looks or swagger or attitude or social media presence. She was talking about the complete package. The talent. The credibility. The authenticity. The respect of the culture. All of the things that you cannot sign a contract to acquire. All of the things that you cannot purchase with an $8 million deal. All of the things that Claressa Shields does not have and, if we are being brutally honest, may never have when it comes to this music industry. And the cruelest, most biting irony of this entire situation is that Claressa Shields' biggest opponent right now is not standing across from her inside a boxing ring. It is not Remy Ma on a track. It is not the comments section on social media. It is not the reaction channels or the blogs or the critics. Claressa Shields' biggest opponent is her own refusal to accept reality. Because the moment Claressa Shields looks in the mirror and says, "I am a boxer, not a rapper. I am an athlete, not a singer. I am a champion in the ring, and that is where my legacy lives and breathes," that is the moment everything changes for her. That is the moment she takes back control of her career, her brand, her money, and her narrative. But until that moment arrives, she is going to keep getting played. She is going to keep getting milked. She is going to keep getting patronized by people who smile in her face and laugh behind her back, and she is going to keep thinking that the laughter is admiration. And I know somebody watching this is going to say, well, who are you to tell Claressa Shields what she can and cannot do with her life? Who died and made you the authority on what lanes people should stay in? And my response to that is straightforward and unapologetic. I am someone who has watched this industry chew up and spit out talented artists for decades. I am someone who has seen what happens when athletes try to cross over into music without the proper foundation, the proper guidance, or the proper honesty from the people around them. I have watched it happen to basketball players, to football players, to Olympians, to fighters. The story never changes. Only the names do. And I am someone who can see, as clear as daylight on a cloudless morning, that Claressa Shields is on a path that ends with her being separated from her money, her dignity, and her legacy, all because nobody in her inner circle had the backbone to sit her down and tell her the truth. So this is me telling the truth. Claressa Shields, you cannot rap. That is not an insult. That is a fact. The same way it is a fact that I cannot box. The same way it is a fact that a world-class chef cannot perform open-heart surgery. We all have our lanes, and your lane is the boxing ring. It is the place where you are unquestionably, undeniably, historically, once-in-a-generation great. And every minute you spend in a recording studio instead of a training gym is a minute you are stealing from the legacy you already built. Every dollar you pour into a music career that has no foundation, no trajectory, and no honest support is a dollar that could have been invested in the sport that made you who you are. And to Papoose, if you are listening, and I seriously doubt that you are given everything we have seen unfold, but if you happen to be watching this, here is my question, and it is a question that cuts straight to the bone of this entire situation. If you truly care about Claressa Shields the way you claim to in those signing party speeches and those Instagram posts and those red carpet appearances, why have you not told her the truth? Why have you not sat her down and said, "Baby, the music is not working. Let us focus on the boxing. Let us build your brand around the thing you are actually, genuinely great at"? Why? Because the music generates content. The music generates headlines. The music generates engagement. And engagement generates revenue. And revenue is what Wynn Records needs to survive. And as long as Claressa Shields thinks she is a rapper, she keeps producing the content that keeps the lights on at that label and the money flowing into the pockets of the people around her. And to Remy Ma, I will say this without hesitation and without a single reservation in my body. That freestyle was everything. It was sharp, it was precise, it was controlled, and above all else, it was honest. It was the kind of honesty that Claressa Shields desperately needs but is not getting from a single person in her immediate circle. The irony that is thick enough to choke on is that Remy Ma, the woman who has every conceivable reason to despise Claressa Shields, might actually be the only person in this entire orbit speaking a truth that could ultimately save her. Because sometimes your biggest critic sees you more clearly than your biggest cheerleader ever will. And to Chrisean Rock, I will say this as well. You ignored Claressa Shields' advice and went right back to Blueface, and people criticized you endlessly for it across every platform imaginable. But in a strange, counterintuitive way, you might have done the most honest thing in this entire saga. You looked at the person giving you advice, you assessed whether that person had the standing and the credibility to give it, and you made your own decision based on your own assessment. That is more self-awareness than most people in this industry ever demonstrate. So where does all of this leave us? It leaves us with a boxer who thinks she is a rapper. A label that thinks she is a paycheck. A partner who thinks she is an opportunity. And a culture that thinks she is a punchline. And the only person who can change any of that, the only person who can alter the trajectory of this story, is Claressa Shields herself. The question that remains unanswered, the question that will determine how this entire saga is remembered, is whether Claressa Shields will wake up before the damage becomes irreversible or whether she will ride this delusion all the way to the bottom, surrounded by people who will applaud her every single step of the way down. So now I want to hear from every single one of you watching this right now. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Claressa Shields is being used and manipulated by Wynn Records and Papoose? Do you think she should walk away from the music career entirely and refocus on what made her great in the first place? And what did you think of Remy Ma's freestyle over the WYFL beat? Was it justified, or did she cross a line? I genuinely want to know where you stand on this, because I believe this conversation needs to happen out in the open, in the daylight, instead of behind closed doors where the people benefiting from Claressa Shields' delusion get to control the narrative and shape the story to serve their own interests. And if you made it all the way to this point in the video, you already know what time it is. Leave a like, share this with somebody who needs to hear it, and make sure you are subscribed because I am nowhere near done breaking this situation down. There are more layers to this story that are still developing as we speak, and when the next piece of the puzzle drops, you are going to want to be right here for it. And if you want to see more content breaking down the biggest stories in hip-hop, in sports, and in the culture where they collide, check out the video sitting on your screen right now. Trust me when I tell you, you are not going to want to miss what is coming next. This story is far from over, and neither are we. The truth does not stop just because people are uncomfortable hearing it, and Claressa Shields deserves to hear it from somebody, even if that somebody is a voice on a screen rather than the people standing right next to her inside that studio.